This title is narrated with virtual voice, computer-generated narration for audiobooks. May's Second Chance Series by Jacie Middlemann. Home to the Valley. May's Second Chance by Jacie Middlemann. This is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, incidents, and events are either the product of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously, and any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, business establishments, events, or locales is entirely coincidental. Home to the Valley, May's Second Chance. Copyright 2018 by Jacie Middlemann. Cover art by ADW. For My Family. Chapter 1. Julie Engstrom sat down wearily on the large queen-sized bed that she hadn't been able to sleep in for weeks. Exactly 6 weeks and 4 days. That was the day when she'd learned from the national media about the very personal tragedy that would change her life forever. Only minutes later, the knock on her door made it official. Unfortunately, it wasn't the only time since then that there'd been a knock on the front door of her home. And now, from what her oldest daughter had just heard on the same 24-hour news channel, that she'd first learned of her husband's death, minutes before being notified about it by the branch of the military service that he'd dedicated and gave his life for, she was apparently going to be paid yet another visit. There was soon to be another knock at her door. She let out a sigh as she leaned forward to flip on the small television in the spacious bedroom. If nothing else, she'd like to hear for herself who was coming to her home to give a boost to their political career on the tattered wings of her personal tragedy. She let the sounds of weather and sports updates go in one ear and out the other as she waited for the headline news at the top of the hour to be cycled through. No doubt that was where she would hear the report on what she'd yet to be notified of. As she waited, another long sigh escaped her as she thought of how much time she spent in this room recently, even though for the life of her she couldn't find it in her to sleep in it. Hadn't been able to even stretch out on the bed that she'd shared for over 20 years with the man who would never share it with her again. She closed her eyes to the memories that conjured up, forced them to another place so she could deal with what she had to now, in this moment. She thought about changing her clothes. Answering the door to a U.S. senator dressed in jeans and one of her late husband's oldest and most worn-out sweatshirts probably wasn't the wisest of wardrobe choices. But even as the thought occurred to her, she simply couldn't find the wherewithal to bother. There'd been a lot that she hadn't been able to find the energy for in weeks. 6 weeks and 4 days to be exact. She needed to get herself together. The last thing Dan would have wanted for her would be to bury herself in grief, to let it consume her until nothing else mattered. She closed her eyes. What else was there? She opened her eyes again at the sound of what shouldn't have meant anything to her. Not now. But when she caught a glimpse of the numbers that she'd just heard moments before, that were scrolling across the lower edge of the television screen just before it shifted to a commercial, she couldn't help but catch her breath. It couldn't be. All she could think was how impossible it was, especially now. She must have heard wrong. Seen and heard only what she wanted to. And what did that mean? Every time she opened them in the morning after tossing and turning all night on the front room sofa, she imagined that she saw her husband smile, greeting her the same as it had throughout over 20 years of marriage. Sure, he might not have been home all those mornings. Deployments were the norm in their home, not the exception. But when he was, she couldn't remember a morning when he hadn't woken her before he left the house for work. Not once. Lord only knew she could be imagining this too. But while she knew based on indisputable proof that her husband was never coming home again, she wasn't nearly as certain about any.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.